Hey guys, welcome to the Pistons Talk Podcast. It would not be the Pistons Talk Podcast if we weren't 3 minutes late. You already know me, Anthony, my co-host Lance Caparosi. We're having a little bit of technical difficulties, but we're here. I know you guys are excited. You guys are like, come on, start the podcast. Well, we started. We're going to talk about your man, Bojan. He's back.
Get it right, Bojan. Bojan is back. Made his debut last night against the Cleveland Cavaliers, one of the best teams in the Eastern Conference. Had 22 points, 2 rebounds, 2 assists, or just 2 rebounds. 2 rebounds and 1 assist. Shot 3 for 10 from the three-point line and 47% from the field in 27 minutes and 27 seconds. He looked great. We all kind of thought it was the missing piece to this team, but there's so many missing pieces to this team. But anyways, Bojan, heck of a debut. I think at least the Pistons are going to be more entertaining with another 20-point scorer on the roster. But what did you think about his debut last night?
I guess he was waiting for me to attend a Piston game to even suit up. But I thought the offense was flowing. They have a floor spacer out there. You could really tell the difference. And not only that, a veteran out there. There was a couple instances, I don't know if they showed it on TV, where Bojan was literally taking Cade Cunningham and Asar Thompson aside after a timeout or during the timeout, and just coaching them up during the timeout. So I think his presence was really missed on the court with his playmaking ability, his ability to score the basketball, and just being a vet that these young kids can lean on.
I agree with that. I agree. There's not really much more to say about his debut. I mean, I guess my only thought was during the game when I watched him play was he didn't start. I think he's going to be the starter.
Mm-hmm.
And unfortunately, with the lineup we saw last night, we'll get into this in a minute, that lineup with those 3 guards pushed Asar Thompson to the bench. And I think Bojan, when he really gets into the rhythm of things, he's going to be the starter, and we're probably going to see Isaiah Stewart, because I don't even know if – I want to look this up because I don't think Marvin Bagley and James Wiseman really got any minutes last night, if at all. I mean, I think James Wiseman did not play, but I do not recall seeing Marvin Bagley on the court last night. But either way, I just think Bojan, now that he's healthy, he moves Isaiah Stewart to the bench. But what do you think about that? Do you think Isaiah Stewart will be a bench player now with Bojan returning?
I know we had talked about it last week, whose spot is he going to take, Asar or Isaiah Stewart's. But I think last game, the only reason why we saw, Bojan not start, or did he start?
No, he came off the bench.
Yeah, I thought he came off the bench. I think the only reason why was because it's the Cavs, and they're just an incredibly big team with Mobley and Allen out there. I think that's the only reason why, but I think they'll slowly try to get him into the starting lineup. Monty said he would try to restrict his minutes, but I think I looked and he played close to 30 minutes coming back after missing so much time. But I get it, the game was kind of close, but I didn't really think too much of the starting lineup because of his comments pregame saying hey, it's because we're playing the Cavs. Maybe it'll be different when they're playing the Grizzlies, where you have Bojan maybe at your power forward and you have Asar at your small forward, because I think that's the lineup you have to go with. I like Isaiah Stewart a lot, but he's such a spot-up shooter that if you run him off that three-point line, his decision-making and the way he processes the game, it's just not there sometimes, and he turns the ball over, and that's okay. I don't expect him to be a guy that can, put the ball on the floor, because that's not really his game. I think that's the next step of evolution for him, is to be a player to, if they run you up that three-point line, pass the ball or try to put it on the floor, but I just don't think it's there right now. I think he's better as a bench player, like you've been mentioning for, it seems like a year.
Yeah, I mean, pretty much since we started. I think it was the first thing I ever said on this podcast was move Isaiah Stewart to the bench. Remember a couple of months ago when he said, I've always been a power forward? I think he's honestly more of a center. I've said this before, I think he's way better in 22 minutes per game than 28, 30, whatever, 34, whatever he's getting this year. I'm looking at time. It looks like it's 34. And that's what I want to see from him. I think that's the next step under Monty's coaching is move Isaiah Stewart to the bench, start Bojan because it gives us, some floor spacing. I do like him off the bench, though. I was not in favor of this when we started the season or really even in the offseason because I don't know. I just think he's so much better as a starter, but he really is a shot creator and a shot maker. Like you could run everything through him in the second unit, whether he's playing with Killian Hayes, Jaden Ivey, Sasser, Monte Morris when he comes back. You could run the offense through Bojan, and it would give you something in that second unit. But I want to see Cade. I want to see Cade feast. I want to see Cade play in space. So give me Bojan starting all night. Move Isaiah Stewart to the bench. I think that solidifies things. But I'm also with you. I think depending on the matchup and the team they're playing against, we're probably going to get just all these different lineups throughout the season. I think the two constant in the starting lineup are going to be Cade and Duren. But I think any given night, it could be some combination of Killian Hayes or Jaden Ivey or both of them, or it could be Killian Hayes and Lasar Thompson and Isaiah Stewart and maybe Bojan. I think it can be any combination of those players because nothing is set in stone with Monty. I just think it's going to be matchup dependent, even though I would like to see the same starting five out on the floor. But we did see something interesting last night too, that 3-guard lineup. And when you were talking about Jaden Ivey before he was drafted, what was 2 years ago, I remember commenting because people were like, why would we go with another guard if we land in the top 5? Yeah. And I said, well, you could honestly play all three of them together. They're all 6'4" or bigger. So you have a 6'5" guard in Killian. You have a 6'6", 6'7" perimeter player guard in Cade Cunningham, and then a 6'4" athletic freak in Jaden Ivey. It's enough size through the 1 through 3. But what were your thoughts on the 3-guard lineup? Because they were actually pretty good. So actually, before you answer that, I'll just share some stats. In 44 minutes together, their offensive rating, the 3 guards, Killian, Jaden Ivey, and Cade Cunningham, offense rating is 112.9. Defense rating is 94.7 with a net rating of 19.2. So pretty good, small sample size. But again, what are your thoughts on the 3-guard lineup?
So I know a lot of people on Twitter last night were talking about the 3-guard lineups. And when I was at the game last night and I saw the starting lineup, the first thing that popped in my head was like, wow, we have no freaking small forwards on this team. I think it was more of the fact that this team doesn't have a dependent small forward right now that can be productive. Your boy Isaiah Livers, he has games where, he's playing great. And he's got games last night where he played 14 minutes and he didn't score. He struggled a little bit.
Yeah.
I think it says more about the team's position at the small forward than anything else. The fact that you have to play Cade Cunningham, Killian Hayes, and Jaden Ivey as your point guard, shooting guard, and small forward has more to do with your small forward depth than those 3 playing. I do like them all playing together, though. To your point, yeah, you can play all 3 together because they're all different types of guards. If you want to categorize Cade as a small forward, I'll let you guys do that. But he plays the point guard position. I think they all bring something different. Cade is very, slow, can get to his spot, get to the mid range, hit a 3, find his teammates. Killian's more of that pass first point guard to set up the teammates. And, Jaden Ivey is just a blur in transition, really good cutter, an improved 3-point shooter. But like I said, I think it was more of not having a consistent small forward that Monty can trust right now rather than I'm going to change the lineup and put 3 guards in. That's just the way I saw it. Maybe people saw it differently.
I don't know. At first I was not I always thought Cade was like you, just a point guard. I think of him more as like a point forward where I liked him doing some off-ball action too. I'm not going to lie. They were they were putting him all over the place, and you really saw his range and just I felt like you kind of saw the whole complete offensive package from him last night. But I want to continue to see him at that 3 spot because I think you can hide him more defensively, even though if you started Asar Thompson too in the backcourt with Killian Hayes, because you're still going to get Cade Cunningham bringing the ball up the floor, and they're going to, have some offense set up where he's running the show, but also being able to play him off the ball. I want to see him more there. I think it's more of a natural fit, and it allows you to do some things that are a little bit more creative. If we'll see it with Monty Williams or not, but offensively, it potentially does it. I like him at that 3 spot. But were you in favor of the 3-guard lineup? Do you want to see more of it during the season, or is that just it for you?
I wouldn't mind it. I don't want to see it like every game. I think when you play a slower paced team and you want to be the faster team, do it. Because I thought in the first quarter while I was down there, they were running like crazy. Like they were just outpacing the Cavs, and the Cavs had to adjust in the second quarter to keep up with their speed. But until the Pistons kind of figure out like a long-term starting lineup, I don't really know what to think. I like it, but at the same time, I don't want to see it like in an everyday rotation.
Man, I'm in favor of it. I really am. Like, whether it's Monte Morris starting in Killian Hayes' spot, or they bring back Asar and they have him playing the perimeter too. I like seeing 3 guards out there that can drive, kick, create a little bit. I think you get that more with Jaden Ivey and Killian Hayes versus Asar Thompson, because Asar Thompson definitely is making that role for himself as a defensive stopper because the offensive game just isn't there. But man, like having Cade play a little more off the ball and letting other guards do, especially if we're getting an aggressive Killian Hayes, it makes more sense. But having an actual point guard out there on the floor for him to run the show and set things up, that just made too much sense with him. And I don't know, I want to see more of him, man, whether it's those 3 starting or some other combination of Monte Morris or Jaden Ivey, or maybe they throw Sasser out there or something. I would like to see more. I would like to see a more 3-guard, see the 3-guard lineup more this season, because I think that can definitely work. And then if you throw Bojan out there with Duren in the front court, yeah, you're losing a little bit defensively, but like Monty Williams said, Bojan's a fighter defensively, and all you got to do is just bring people into the post and let Duren do his thing. So it seems pretty simple, but this team's not going to win much more. Might as well just experiment and see what you have for the rest.
Yeah, I found it interesting. You said like have Cade playoff ball, because I think that's what you saw in the Knick game.
Yeah.
Because Killian was in the starting lineup, and you saw Cade more to control. He didn't have to handle the ball as much, and it seemed like he kind of thrived playing that 2-guard position versus playing the point guard position. And Killian was kind of running the show, and Killian had a great game too.
Yep.
Versus the Knicks. Maybe that's something they experiment more with, is maybe have Cade play the shooting guard versus the point guard, and just have a more of a steady presence that doesn't really turn the ball over as much, so he's not so exhausted by the fourth quarter and he's just gassed.
Yeah, and teams they don't have to blitz him, they don't have to throw multiple defensive players at him. I think also having him play off the ball, you could use him somewhat as like a decoy, so it opens things up for other players. But against the Knicks, man, he had 31 points, 8 assists, 2 rebounds, 2 steals, but he shot 12 for 20 from the field for 60%, and 4 for 9 from the 3-point line. Also shot 75% from the free throw line, which is really low, especially in his last 5 games where he hasn't missed a free throw other than against the Knicks. That's crazy. In 5 games, Indiana, Washington, Lakers, the New York Knicks, and the Cleveland Cavaliers, he's only missed 1 free throw in those 5 games. Just incredible.
Yeah, it's like I think a lot of people do agree with us. Like having Cade at the 2, like we just had Greedy Mac watching on Facebook saying, I don't understand why Monte hasn't moved Cade to the 2 guard. It's ridiculous. I think if you watch him, like I'm not saying that Cade Cunningham is a perfect player, because he's not. He missed all of last season. There are some passes where I'm yelling at my TV. And as a fan, I think I'm a little bit more critical on players than I should be at times. But there are some passes where they're just like so nonchalant, and like a defender gets it like easily. There's a play against the Lakers where like he passed it, and D'Angelo Russell, like he barely had to move it like 2 feet in the first quarter, and he literally grabbed it. Like I wouldn't hate it if you wanted to, like, when Monte Morris comes back, start him at the point guard. I wouldn't mind if you want to start Marcus Sasser at the point guard, or you want to start Jaden Ivey at the point guard and just play Cade off ball, because I think he's a good enough shooter and a cutter, and he's got a nice mid-range game to play shooting guard, and he's tall enough too. Maybe that's something they do look into, because I think through the first 20 games, we've seen Cade just not really take care of the ball in terms of setting up his teammates. And maybe that's just not something he's comfortable with doing right now.
I'm going to throw a name out there and you tell me if it makes sense. Cade Cunningham, if he played like Joe Johnson, would that disappoint you?
Pistons Joe Johnson?
Oh, come on.
Pistons legend Joe Johnson. I would say if he plays like Atlanta Hawks Joe Johnson, like prime ISO Joe.
Yeah.
I know. See, like, this is a lot of debate right now in Pistons Facebook groups, because they're not sure. And I don't want to get into this discourse too much, but they're not sure if Cade's going to be like a MVP type player.
I don't think
if he's just going to be a perennial all-star type player. Is he closer to a Brandon Ingram and a Chris Middleton than he is a Luka Doncic? I don't know. I really don't. I think for me to judge him, I want to see him for the rest of this season, and maybe I could have an answer. But like, if he turns into Joe Johnson, like Atlanta Hawks Joe Johnson, I think some Pistons fans would be really upset, because he was the first overall pick. Yeah, and that's no slight at Joe Johnson. Joe Johnson was a hell of a basketball player.
See, I've always hated the Luka Doncic comparisons for Cade Cunningham. I get it. There are some similarities where they're both bigger jumbo guards, but he doesn't play like Luka. I mean, there are some similarities, and I know with like Team USA, you could kind of put him in the role, but he was playing with a bunch of future All-Stars too, with that team. So they're going to make him look great, but I also don't want to see Cade in that like heliocentric offense where everything is ran through him. Like, some of it's fine, but I'm okay. I've always compared him to like a Paul Pierce type, a bigger forward, a little bit slower, not the most athletic, can play make a little bit, but really thrived when he was playing next to a solid point guard like a Rajon Rondo. And I don't know. That's just kind of what I'm seeing from Cade Cunningham, but I would not be disappointed if he had a similar career. I mean, I think he'll have a better career than Joe Johnson, which, again, no slight at him. He was a 7-time All-Star. But I see more Joe Johnson, Paul Pierce in Cade's game than I do Luka Doncic. I guess I'll leave it.
Yeah. That's what Wes Weaver Jr. said. He said Cade plays like Paul Pierce.
Yep.
Paul Pierce was a hell of a player, too.
Hall of Famer.
Yeah. I mean, I love his podcast with Kevin Garnett. They keep it so real on that podcast. But, I mean, Paul Pierce was a hell of a player. I think a lot of Pistons fans on Twitter, they love Cade Cunningham, and deservedly so. Like, he's supposed to be your franchise player, but I think they have the bar with the expectations so damn high right now.
Yeah.
If he has one bad game, their energy changes. You're like, oh, he's a bust, trade him, get him out of here. Like, he's got no help. It's like it's such an emotional roller coaster with Pistons fans right now with Cade Cunningham, and I understand it. Like, you have 2 wins. I get it. You won 17 last year. But unless you get him some real help and build around him, we really don't know what the type of player he's going to be. Because you can be a bad player and put good stats on a good team. What happens if you go to a good team and you're not asked to take 15 to 20 shots a night?
Oh, it's going to get real interesting when we get into this podcast a little bit more, when we talk about this in a little bit more in depth. But so apparently the Detroit Pistons passed up on 2 first-round picks for Bojan last year. That comes from, I think it was Michael Scotto on Hoops Hype. And I know how some people feel about him, and I saw one person on Twitter say he's not legit, he doesn't have any sources, whatever. I don't care, but that's what we're talking about. I get it. If there's 2 first-round picks on the table, you probably should have taken it. But also, on the other hand, this team is already so young, man. I think 6 or maybe even 8 of their players have less than 4 or less years on this team, and they're playing minutes for the Pistons. Like, you're not going to win with such a young team. It just does not happen. You got to have some veterans on the roster. So I understand why Troy kept Bojan. He is a guy that can help them, eventually win whenever that may be. I don't know how many games we get to. We might break. I'm kind of anxious. I'm kind of actually said if we break the Clippers record, I mean, at least we broke a record, But anyways, 2 first-round picks were supposedly on the table for Bojan. How do you feel about that? Would you have traded him for 2 first, or would you have kept him?
Before I answer that, I do want to give a shout out to Michael Scotto. Shout out to him. He actually listens to the podcast, so that's really cool. And if I had to guess, because if you read his piece from Hoops Hype, he said a contender offered 2 first-round picks for Bojan. If I had to bet money, I think it was the Dallas Mavericks. I really do. Because we talked about the rumors that the Mavericks wanted to throw Tim Hardaway Jr. in there. The Mavericks had a 2025 and I believe a 2027 first-round pick, but they eventually used one of those first-round picks for Kyrie. So that's probably, if I had to guess, that was probably the team that offered the 2 first-round picks for Bojan. To answer your question, would I take that trade? I don't know. I really don't, because I don't know what the other trade offers were. There could have been a better trade offer out there for maybe the Lakers. I doubt they offered it, but maybe they offered a Hachimura, in a first. That would be a good trade, but I doubt they would do that. But I don't really know what all the trades offers are out there. But if it's a contender, it's going to be draft picks, maybe 2, 3, 4 years down the line, and who knows if Troy Weaver's even the GM that long. You don't know. Will he get extended again? I know he just got an extension from Tom Gores, I believe last year, but I don't know. Do you really want to take a gamble on a contender's draft picks that are probably 20, maybe 30 in the first round? I don't know. To your point, I know last week you said that sometimes we hold on to players longer than we should. I do agree with you on that aspect, but I really don't know how good those first round picks were. If they were late first round picks, then yeah, no, I'm good. If it was Dallas or the Lakers, it's 2027 or 2028, and we're in 2023. I gotta wait 5 years for a first round pick. Really?
I did say that, and I mean, I look at teams like the Magic and the Oklahoma City Thunder, and they're both 2 really young teams, and I just don't know. And it doesn't seem like they have a ton of veterans playing major minutes for them. They somehow just made it work out. So I don't know if I don't want to blame the players. That's the thing. I'm kind of avoiding that topic as a fan of this team. Is it the players and they just haven't figured out, or are they just not as good? Do they look better because the Pistons are so bad? Is that what this is? Or is it, this team just doesn't have enough veterans where they can learn from or they can rely on? When things get tough, you need a bucket. You don't have another shot maker. You don't have another guy that can go out there and get you a bucket. You don't have a guy that can steady the pace so you're not turning the ball over 21 times. I don't know what it is. So I understand why you keep Bojan, but in the other hand, damn, you know what I'm saying? Maybe you should have traded him while his name was hot, because 2 first-round picks, those could be packaged to bring, a slightly younger veteran in that has some experience that could help this team win. I don't know. It's just it's not just one fix for the Pistons, and I guess that's kind of what I'm getting at. So I'm a little disappointed they turned down to trade Bojan for 2 first-round picks, but I'm also still in the understanding of you need veterans to win, and that's what this team desperately needs. They don't need more first-round picks because this team is already so young, and it's just not working.
Yeah, like I said, I think the Pistons going into this season, they did not expect to start the first 20 games with only 2 victories. I think if you had to ask them that, they'd be like, no, we didn't expect that. We didn't expect our vets that we traded for this summer to be injured. Joe Harris played a little bit, but in the minutes that he did play, he wasn't really hitting 3-point shots at the rate that everyone was selling us on, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Excuse me. And the Monte Morris thing, I know we talked about it last week, like January maybe, at the earliest, February at the latest. Like, he could not play and the trading deadline could go by. Like, think about that. Like, that's kind of crazy. And then a guy that led your team in scoring just played his first game in December. Like,
Yeah.
the season's almost a quarter of the way over. And it's really hard to like kind of pick like who's to blame right now for like this mess. But I don't know, man. It's hard when you hear these rumors that they turned it down last year. But one thing I will say is like, if we don't move them this year and they cut him because they want to save, they want to have cap flexibility, as they always tell us in free agency. Like, I don't know, man. Like, I don't know if I can go into another offseason trying to sell hope, and then I know they're probably just going to use their cap space on trades and not sign a single soul. But I know someone just asked us, like, who are the Pistons going to sign in free agency? I'm like, dude, I don't know. This front office has never shown interest in signing free agents. This front office has shown you more than once they are willing to trade for a player rather than try to make bids in free agency. I mean, if you look, the last big name free agent they actually spent a little bit of money on was like Mason Plumlee or Kelly Olynyk. Like, Kelly Olynyk was like $13 million and people are losing their shit. Like, that was like the last like big name free agent that Detroit got. And like, there's this, I know I'm rambling. There's like this narrative like, oh, who would want to come to Detroit anyways? No one wants to come to Detroit.
Yeah.
Look at Houston just did. A lot of people thought they overpaid for Van Vliet and Dillon Brooks, and they look great, man.
They look like a playoff team.
They are a playoff team right now. Like, you gotta, spend a little bit when you're rebuilding. Like, I'm not saying like go into like the Charlie V or Ben Gordon type of stuff, but like, I'm not saying go get a star. Like, go get those mid-tier players. Like, go get those Grant Williams, those Max Strus, those Kelly Oubre's. Like, you're telling me none of those guys could have made a difference on this team right now? Like, me and you were like, maybe we can go get Kelly Oubre. Maybe you can get him for cheap. And before his injury that he had, he's balling right now with Philly.
Yeah, he looked
and
good.
Like, off the bench, like, that's a player, like, that's a small forward that, like, go get him. He can shoot threes. He can play a little bit of defense. He can pass. Like, made too much sense, I guess.
And he's really cheap. I think he signed for the he signed. Yeah, I think he's might be making like $2 million this year. That's an incredible bargain for a Kelly Oubre. I think the other part that's kind of frustrating is because if they did trade Bojan for 2 first-round picks, they probably still trade for Joe Harris. They probably make no moves in free agency. I mean, it seems like you have to keep the veterans on this team because Troy Weaver is like allergic to adding some of these guys, and it's so weird because he'll trade for a guy knowing that we already have cap space, and then he'll offload them and try to figure something out to get more cap space. And you're like, well, you already had it. You know what I'm saying? You already had the money to go play with, and you did absolutely nothing for it. You made, like you were saying, he made it easy for the Brooklyn Nets to re-sign Cam Johnson by taking on Jameer. It's like, why are we doing other teams favors? And why are you not playing the game? I just don't get it. I don't want to turn this into like I don't have any faith in Troy Weaver, but I feel like that's how I'm starting to sound. Because again, just if you keep him through this trade deadline and this team shows no improvement, what was it for? What was the point of keeping him when you had 2 first-round picks on the table? Even though I've been going back and forth on it. But man, it's just there's something about it. I just don't understand. Because now if this team looked like it was going to win with Bojan returning, and then it makes sense. Like, yeah, you keep him through the trade deadline and you run it back with him next year and Cade and everybody healthy and see if you can make some noise. But I just don't think it's going to go that way. And now we're going to be stuck with this guy for the rest of the year, and it's going to be fun and exciting, but then he might can't he walk, or he has a partially guaranteed deal, so they might just cut him like you were saying to save money, and then we're left without a Bojan and nobody to fill his role. I don't know. It's just crazy to me. The more
I told you last week, I'm like, Patrick Williams will be a Detroit Piston. You can bookmark that.
Like, how young does Troy want this team to be?
Yeah, like I don't want to bash Troy Weaver. I'm not here to do that. I can be critical of him. I do think when you look at teams that have rebuilded, I saw this earlier today. It was like the Cleveland Cavaliers, the Minnesota Timberwolves, and I can't remember the other team, but they all started in 2020 and they all had 20 wins, right?
Yep.
And all of those teams right now are playoff teams, right? Like you can rebuild a team in, maybe it takes you 3-4 years. But I think to your point, and some fans' points, their frustration is like, okay, we're 4 years in and we're still where we were in 2020. And I understand like the COVID season, whatever. I get it. Like you have Blake on the books. I get it. But we've never used our cap space to take on a contract to get draft capital. Yeah. Like that's something that I was asking for. I was like, take on bad contracts. Like OKC, they are merchants for that. They will take on a bad contract for a draft pick. Like, I don't get why we couldn't have done that. Like, I would have taken on a bad contract for a first or some seconds. Like, why not? It just seems like right now, this team doesn't really have a plan. And I think the plan is just to stockpile top 5 picks and see if it works. And if it doesn't, trade those top 5 picks for somebody else. It's just like, I don't like that plan personally. If that's the plan, I don't like it. It's no direction to me.
But I don't even know if they're going to trade any of the first round picks. He might just keep them and then hopefully, or, whoever just throws a dart at the wall and hopes like, okay, best player available. Maybe he'll turn out to be an all-star. I just don't know. I just don't get it. But we also have more to this Hoops Hype report. Killian Hayes might be a player. I hate when they put that in there. I'm just going to say it. Might be a player. Yeah, dude. Okay, yeah. Maybe they trade. I don't know. Well, anyways, might be a player teams trade for. I don't know what you get for Killian Hayes. I don't know what team is looking out for him, but I've said it on a previous podcast. I don't think the Pistons ever trade Killian Hayes. I really think they would move on from Jaden Ivey before they move on from Killian Hayes. And I don't even think they'll move on from Jaden Ivey either, even though every other game he's in the doghouse under Monty Williams. So I don't know how much I believe this report that teams might be looking at Killian Hayes. I think he's going to get reassigned, and some of us are going to look at it as a bargain. Some of us are going to look at it like, what are we doing? And I don't know, but what are your thoughts? Do you think there really is a trade market for Killian Hayes?
Yes, I think there is. I think there is a trade market for Killian Hayes. I don't know what it is, but I do believe there is a trade market for him. I know some Pistons fans think that he's the worst player in the association. They don't think he has a trade market. I think he does. I think his ceiling is a backup point guard in this league. And I think he could be a damn good backup point guard. He's shown the ability to defend, pass. And there are games where he finally figures out, say, oh, I'm 6'5". I'm going to use my frame. They're like the Knicks game, like he'll suck me back in. He'll have a really good game. And then he'll have a stinker. But he had a pretty good game last night. I will say that. But I think there is a trade market for him. I just don't know what it is. Maybe it's a second. Maybe it's a rotational player. It just depends what the Pistons are asking for. I just don't really think he's going to be in their long-term future plans. I don't.
Really?
Even though, no, I don't. I think you spent a 5th overall pick on Jaden Ivey. And, Killian was Troy's first pick. Yeah. And maybe it's a little sentimental value with Troy where, he really wants to see him pan out, give him every opportunity to pan out. And I've told you, I think this is his last year to like really prove it. But I wouldn't be surprised if the Pistons did try to see what they can get for him this February. Because I think they can get something in return. I just don't think it's going to be as much as some Pistons fans think.
See, I really think there's no market for Killian Hayes. I think there's enough game film on him where teams kind of know this player is really inconsistent. He's pretty good defensively, even though offensive players still blow by him. They do the same thing against Jaden Ivey as well. He does have a good assist to turn ratio. He is a guy that he doesn't turn the ball over a lot, but he's not a risky playmaker either. You know what I'm saying? Like, he's pretty safe. Like, he's not going to try to do anything, which I think adds value. That's why that's why his future probably is I like to think a third string point guard, but maybe as a backup point guard again. But I just don't think there's really any team out there that's looking to add a Killian Hayes. Like, when I'm like mentally going down the teams, where I'm like, would Sacramento want him? Probably not. Would the Lakers want him? Probably not. You know, because even though he did have 23 against the Knicks and 13 against the Cavaliers, where he shot 77% from the field against the Knicks and 55% from the field against the Cavaliers, it's such an outlier. You know what I'm saying? It has happened a couple of times during the season. He actually has 6 games, where he shot 50% or better from the field. And then the rest of them, I mean, he has some games where he never even hit a shot this season. So, and he has multiple games like that. I just don't think there's a market for Killian Hayes.
I do, though. I do. I could probably name 4 teams right off the top of my head that would probably trade for him. I think San Antonio would trade for him. I think Phoenix would trade for him. I think Minnesota would trade for him. I think you could even throw the Hornets into the mix. There's a market for him. Like, you look at teams that have poor backup point guard play, there's a market for him. It's just not going to be like what fans want. Like, you might get like maybe you get 2 or 3 seconds. Maybe you get something in return. I'm just not sure, like, if the Pistons are willing to pull the trigger. Like, I saw that picture of, I don't know if you saw it, but they went to Monte Morris's jersey retirement. And Monty Williams' hand is all over Killian Hayes' shoulder, and Jaden Ivey's like way over with Jalen Duren. I know Pistons Twitter had a riot with that. But like I said, there's a market for him. Like I said, there's a lot of teams right now that need a backup point guard, and I think he could fill that role. Like, I think Minnesota would be such a great team for him to go to, because he could play with guys like Naz Reid, and like that second unit should just be filthy.
See, I think they'd rather – I'm looking at the roster right now, by the way. I think they'd rather just run like Shake Milton or Kyle Anderson at the point guard and just say, hey, you guys go have fun. You know what I'm saying? Because, I mean, Mike Conley, he's playing pretty well for him. I mean, Anthony Edwards does some playmaking. I just don't really see the market for him. But, I mean, maybe you're right. Maybe San Antonio takes a stab, but – they have Trey Jones, and they don't play him a ton of minutes either, which is so weird to me. They're still trying the whole Jeremy Sokin thing. Sochan, I can't believe I just butchered his name twice, said they're trying him at that point. They're trying some weird experiment with him. So I don't know. Maybe there is a market for Killian Hayes. I just don't see it. The only way I could see him being traded is if he's like a throw-in piece. Like, hey, we'll take on a bad contract, but you got to take Killian Hayes back. But even then, I don't see Troy Weaver trading Killian Hayes at all, because that's his baby. That was his first draft pick, you know? And dude, if you can re-sign him for less than $10 million, that might be kind of a bargain, and maybe what we're looking at for Killian Hayes this offseason. I don't know.
Maybe I mean, some people agree with you. Some people don't think there's a market for him. I do. I think there's a market for him, because like some people, whether it's on YouTube, you know, Facebook, a lot of these GMs actually watch the tape. Like they have people say like, hey, go get me some Killian Hayes tape. I want to see if he'd fit our system. Like, GMs do that. Coaches do that. And there's a lot to like with him as a player. Like, he's not a perfect player. Like, offensively, I think we wish he'd be better, but I think there's a market for him. It's just probably not a whole lot. Maybe it's a second. Maybe it's a rotational piece back. Like I said, he's on the last year of his rookie contract. So if a team's trading for him, it's just like a, you know, low risk, high reward situation for him. So if he balls out for a couple of months, maybe they sign him to a new contract this summer. Who knows?
I feel like the Pistons are going to re-sign him for some, not a crazy offer, but something. But anyways, with all this Killian Hayes talk and him might potentially being on the move, are you convinced that Cade Cunningham and Jaden Ivey are the backcourt of the future for the Detroit Pistons? Now, we did have a similar podcast with a title like this, like what do they have or whatever in the backcourt, but are you convinced that they're the future in the backcourt? with Monty Williams still at the helm as the head coach?
I do. Even though it seems like Monty is really rough on Jaden Ivey, and I can't really defend the benching. I can't defend what has happened this season. I still think you have to see if the backcourt works. Now, obviously, he's been benching him a lot. His role has been all over the place. You're coming off the bench. You're going to play small forward. Like, I don't know, man. It's been a roller coaster for him. But I think he will be a starting shooting guard on this team. I just don't know when it's going to be. It seems like Monty's just trying anything, seeing what works, and he really doesn't praise Jaden that much in like post-game interviews. Like I maybe heard like one or two times he's actually like giving him his kudos. It's always Killian, it's always Sasser, it's always Burks. Like you don't really hear too much. Well, Jaden had a good game today. I'm really proud of him. Like you don't hear that. I don't know if it's maybe they butted heads in practice. I don't know if it's maybe they just don't see eye to eye, or maybe it's just, the careless turnovers and him playing out of control at times. I don't know what it is. I'm not going to pretend I know what it is, but I know a lot of fans are frustrated with it.
Yeah, I'm not convinced that I think that Troy Weaver, if he's the guy, he eventually finds someone to pair with Cade Cunningham. And again, I think Asar Thompson is ultimately the starter. I still think Jaden Ivey, if it came down to trading one of the core guys, he would be the odd man out, just because I think Asar's potential and his ceiling's a little bit higher than Jaden Ivey, because Jaden Ivey, for the most part, is still he's a pretty raw basketball player. He's been playing for a while, but there's a lot of things you wish you could just get more out of his game. Even though he has made great strides since his first game in a Pistons uniform, he's a much better player than he was when he was drafted here. But there's still so much more room to grow. But Sar, more of a little bit cleaned up a little bit, I guess you could say, more polished of a player, already better defensively, showing some playmaking chops, so showing his ability to score the ball, even showing a little bit of a jump shot. Like there's a lot more to love there. And I just don't see how you make it work with Cade, Jaden, and Asar Thompson all starting, because that team is, even though Cade, some people still view him as a point guard, they really do need a lead ball handler on that team. And you don't have one of those with those three guys, at least not right now. So I think eventually a move is to bring one in. So I'm not convinced that Jaden Ivey and Cade Cunningham are the backcourt of this team in the future. I just don't see it.
I do personally. I think it's too early to tell, and I think Game Not said it perfectly in the YouTube comment section. He said, I think Ivey is having a Scotty Barnes type of second year where he's still figuring out his identity in the league. I say give Ivey at least another season to prove himself. I 100% agree. Because if you watch Scotty Barnes this year, like Scotty Barnes looks like he could be a franchise player. Last year, like, he had his ups and downs, and like I think that you have to give it time. A lot of people are just so fed up with the losing and so fed up with the Pistons not, making the playoffs. I understand it. I get it. But you have to be patient. Like this guy was a 5th overall pick in last year's draft. I'm not willing to, give up on him or trade him. Is he a perfect player? No, he makes a lot of mistakes, and that's okay. Like I'm not expecting him to be a two-way player and be, average 30 points a game. He's not there yet. But I have seen progression in defense. I've seen progression in his offensive game too. But like I said, I'm not really too concerned. Like what Monty's doing to him, I think it's for him to be a better player at the end of the day. But I think some fans don't see it that way.
Yeah, that's fair. So multiple reports suggest the Chicago Bulls continue to look for a trade for Zach LaVine, and the Pistons could be in play. This comes from Bobby Marks. I feel like he's a pretty reliable source when it comes to rumors out there. He has his ear to the ground. So you already know what the question is. Would you make a trade for Zach LaVine? At his peak, he was averaging, I believe, 27 points per game with the Chicago Bulls. He's a 2-time All-Star. Like we talked about on a previous podcast, He's only been to the playoffs one time, and that was in what year was that? That was, I think, in 2018, 2019 when they were in the playoffs. And 21-22, excuse me, where he played 4 games, averaged 19 points, 5 rebounds, 6 assists. So he's a little bit of a playmaker. Shot 43% from the field, 38% from 3 on 6 attempts. So my question, you already know it's coming. Would you make a play or would you trade for Zach LaVine if you were the Pistons GM?
Before I answer that, I want to actually play the audio version of Bobby Marks talking, because I think some people didn't see it. About him talking about it. So I'm going to play this clip and then I'll give you my answer after that. A little 20-second clip.
Detroit is 2-17. I would not be surprised if they stick their toe in the Zach LaVine to see what his market is and see if we can get a guy who's making, a former All-Star who we couldn't get in free agency. And if it doesn't cost us much, maybe just cost us a bunch of expiring contracts and maybe one of the younger kids that they go out and do something like that. That would be a kind of a team I would just keep an eye on as far as with LaVine.
So, to his point, dip their toe in, actually call. Not saying that they'll do it, seeing what the market could possibly be, because, Adrian Wojnarowski a couple of days ago said that there's no trade market for him. They might not get a first-round pick. They might just get some expirings, because to Woj's point and to Bobby Marks's point is, why would I trade for a Zach LaVine that is on a pretty expensive deal that he's not going to be your first best player, maybe not your second best player, maybe your third best player for a lot of these contending teams. But for the Pistons standpoint, and I'll give you my answer in a second, this just reeks of a Blake Griffin trade. And I'm not comparing the two at all. I'm comparing the standpoint of a guy that was a former All-Star, a guy that's on a bigger deal. He can give you points. He can give you production. That's what it reminds me of. Me personally, I've been against it. I know I've seen you and Wes on Twitter saying yeah, I would consider it. He's a hell of a player. I think Zach LaVine's a hell of a player. And I think if he was on the Pistons, I would root for him. But I don't know, man. Do I really want to, get off some expirings? Do I want to throw I'm just spitball. Maybe I throw James Wiseman, Alec Burks, and you got to throw in a young guy, and they'll probably want Jaden Ivey. Are you really willing to do that? I personally would want to get off expirings to try to get something, but I'm probably not going to give the Bulls one of my younger guys. One, I don't want to see him 4 times a year. And if he does good, fans will never shut the hell up about it. We already know that. But I probably wouldn't do the trade. I think he's the type of shooting guard that Cade does need. I will say that. He's the type of shooting guard that you need. You need that movement type of shooter if you think Cade's going to be your point guard. But I would probably pass just because of the contract alone. Not to say that the player isn't a great player. He is. I mean, you look at his stats. He's one of the better players in the NBA. But the contract for me, I was like, yeah, no.
You know how I feel. I love Zach LaVine. I forget who said it, but they were saying how Jaden Ivey and Zach LaVine at the age of 21, that Jaden Ivey was a better player than Zach LaVine. Zach LaVine at 21 years old, his 3rd year in the league, he only played 47 games. They were all starts. He was playing 37 minutes per game, shooting 46% from the field, 39% from 3 on 6.6 attempts, and averaging 19 points per game with 3 rebounds and 3 assists. That's a pretty damn good 3rd season in the NBA at 21 years old. Mm-hmm. I don't know who was saying it, but dude, you were so wrong with what you were saying. I get you're trying to stick up for one of your own. I guess the question you have to ask yourself is, do you see Jaden Ivey being better than Zach LaVine down the line? And at his peak, Zach LaVine was 27 points per game, 5 rebounds, 5 assists. And those stats in the way he played, shooting 51% from the field, 42% from the 3, that got them to the playoffs. He played winning basketball that year for the Chicago Bulls in 58 games. So is Jaden Ivey's peak going to be better than that? That's what you have to ask yourself. And if your answer is no, I think you have to trade. He'd have to be the guy you throw in, even if you have 4 times per year. That's how I look at things.
Yeah, I mean that's a different perspective to look at it. I think some people didn't like my comparison with Blake Griffin. I'm just talking about contract wise.
Yeah,
I'm not talking about the player. I'm not, because like Blake, the one healthy season he did have, the Pistons were a 6 seed at one point and they dropped to an 8 seed. I think that season Blake had was historically great for him. I'm not comparing the run Blake had to what Zach LaVine could possibly do. I'm comparing the contracts. And I know some people are like, oh, the salary caps are going up. Who cares? If Monty Williams won't play Jaden Ivey for playing defense, I think he would have a hell of a time playing Zach LaVine. Zach LaVine is a negative defender. He's not. He doesn't really defend much. Like he'll try and stay in front of people, but like to your question, I think Jaden Ivey could be the type of player that is similar to Zach LaVine, but you have to play him to find out, man. You really do. Like you're not playing him right now. I think Jaden Ivey can have a similar type of career if he develops properly. He develops his jump shot. His 3-point shot becomes a little bit more consistent. His mid-range becomes more consistent. I think there's just such a large sample size with Zach LaVine. You saw it in Minnesota where he really developed, but they really couldn't do anything. He made the playoffs with the Bulls, but if we're being fair, that Bulls team had a lot of talent around him. That's the thing with me. It's just like if you trade for him, what are you going to do in free agency? Is this going to be your free agency signing? Because we talked about it a couple of minutes ago. The Pistons use trades like, free agency. They're going to have a lot of cap off this year because a lot of these guys are on expiring deals. But I think if you are going to trade for somebody, if you are going to trade Jaden Ivey, I don't think Zach LaVine would be the guy I look to go after.
And I get what you mean when you were saying Blake Griffin. It's kind of like a desperation type of trade where you're like, all right, this isn't working. Let's just go for the former All-Star and see if it works. And for one season under Blake Griffin, it did. He had not even arguably, he had one of the best individual seasons in a Pistons uniform ever. It was an incredible season he had for the Detroit. I think he made All-NBA third team that year. But anyways, that's beside the point. Mm-hmm. Zach LaVine, if he is truly on the trade block and he's actually linked to the Detroit Pistons, even with the contract in play, I would still have such a hard time saying no, just because, like, man, I need some excitement when I watch the Pistons, and I want to see another scorer like this alongside Cade Cunningham and now Bojan. I think it could be a lot of fun. And I think since he is such an elite level shot maker, they're not going to have a problem playing him. Like, it's just, he's so good offensively. I mean, I know he's having a down year this year, but he's so good offensively. You have to play him. And again, all you need to do is stay in front of your guy a little bit, but also just have him drive into Jalen Duren, and then Jalen Duren will put him in his place. That's really all you need to do. Yeah. Again, easier said than done. If he really is on, I would love for the Pistons to at least dip their toes in it, like Bobby Mark said. Dip your toes in it, put some feelers out there, figure out what the Chicago Bulls want, and then try to bring Zach LaVine in to the Detroit Pistons. And if you don't have to give up Jaden Ivey, great. But maybe try to make Alex Caruso part of that deal too. I don't know.
Yeah, it's like I like LaVine. I do. I just don't think he's the player that I would go after. Okay. I know some people in the comment section right now are talking about Siakam. Going after him in free agency. I think I would rather go after a guy like that in free agency than kind of be risky and trade for LaVine, because like LaVine's kind of a diva. LaVine's kind of like a locker room cancer. Like he got mad that DeMar DeRozan took the last minute shot instead of him. Like I don't want that type of like energy in my locker room. I don't want a guy that is so into himself that if K takes the last shot, he's upset with it, That's the other side of the game you have to look at. Like if Jimmy Butler is talking shit about you and saying like you don't have it, or other players in the league have said like more like because I was going back, like looking at like all the interviews and like from beat reporters. So like, yeah, man, like the kid's talented, but like it's just the attitude that is, I think, off-putting to a lot of other organizations right now.
I also have no faith that the Pistons go after Siakam, though. That's my other thing, too.
Yeah.
Look, we have all this money. There's a lot of money to play with. There's some interesting names coming up in free agency. It's not a deep free agency class, but there are some quality names. I just don't trust the front office to go make a play on any of these guys. So in order to get better, we got to play the trade market. And if you have to give up some assets to bring someone better in, it doesn't even have to be Zach LaVine, but we're talking about him because that was the rumor. But go out and make a play for somebody to make this team better if you're not going to play in free agency. We do have one bit of injury news, and this was Asar Thompson. Last night, he did not play much against the Cavaliers, but he looked like Rip Hamilton with that mask on. He had suffered a right facial structure or damage during the Knicks game. Josh Hart took him out on a drive to the hoop. But Asar Thompson, he's going to play through it. They're just going to have him continue to wear the mask. But my question to you is, do you think it will affect his minutes per game?
Yeah, I don't like. First of all, like, I don't know how the hell he gets a foul from Josh Hart.
Yep.
First of all, that's beside the point. But it might affect his playing time. I don't know how serious like the injury is in his face. Obviously not that serious because he's playing, but he seems like the type of kid that will play hurt. You look at him, he's got like slings on his thumb, his wrist are like taped up. Like he just looks like he's been bruised and beaten so far this season. And I don't really know what his minutes are going to look like, especially with Bojan coming back. I don't know if it's going to be a bench role. I don't know if they're going to put him in the starting lineup next to Bojan. But if I had to guess, it's probably like around 15 to 20 minutes a game. Seems like Monty is just really leaning towards other players in the rotation that can create a little bit more offense right now, which is kind of funny because it's kind of contradicting what he said in his press conference to say we really want to focus on the defensive end of the floor, but now he's looking for more offense from guys on the bench.
I think it affects his minutes. I think the injury does a little bit. They probably don't want to put him in a position where he could get hurt more, where he'd miss more time because his rookie year is so important just to learning the NBA game. So last against the Cavaliers, he got 16 minutes. Against the Knicks, he only played 13. Now, he was in foul trouble in both those games. He had 5 fouls apiece. And I think at one moment he had played less than 10 and already had 3 fouls in the first half. So that might play a role in it too. That might have some effect. But I do think being hurt, because he has taken a little bit of damage. Like I think he even had a scar under his eye before he had a little fracture. But I think it messes with his minutes just a little bit more than Bojan returning. I think Asar at least I thought Asar had done enough to earn, 20, 25 minutes per game with the Pistons, but we'll see. I think I just think it's going to mess with him a little bit.
Yeah, like he's just been a guy that, to your point, he just gets beaten up. And I'm starting to wonder when he's going to get the respect from refs. I really am. Because he gets beaten, he gets legal screened, he gets elbowed in the face, he gets stepped on. It's just like, when is enough with him? When he does get beat up, it seems like it's just because he's in the head of the offensive player that's guarded him. Like, dude, we're a rookie. Why are you doing this to me? Do you not know who I am? Make it a little easier for me. It seems it's probably not like that, but when the NBA has a reputation of not being a defensive league, you have a young kid coming in there and just smothering you. It probably gets pretty frustrating. But Asar Thompson, again, he is dealing with an injury. Hopefully it doesn't make him miss any games. But again, 13 and 16 minutes in his last 2. So James Wiseman, the former number 2 overall pick, and Troy Weaver's number 1 on his big board,
has mostly failed to live up to the hype. But as of recently, he's been getting some run. He even got in that surprise move where he was playing over Marvin Bagley. I believe it was after the Indiana game where Marvin Bagley looked really engaged defensively, even had 3 blocks against him. Marvin Bagley doesn't play. So do you think that they're just showcasing James Wiseman and they wanted to make a trade for him? Or is Monty still trying to figure out who's who on his team?
So when we were playing Washington, I thought about that because like they've been linked to trading for James Wiseman for a couple of months. Like a lot of national radio shows have been saying like, why not go get Wiseman on the cheap? Because they're rebuilding too. But then I saw like a couple of games where he was like getting more minutes than Marvin Bagley, and Marvin Bagley has played phenomenally this year. Like he's played really well. I don't know what Bagley did to get in the doghouse. I really don't. But I think what Monty said is like, I just want to, give him a fair run. I want to, see what he has. And like, if that's the case, fine. But I just don't like that Marvin Bagley has to have his minutes basically cut in half. And he's one of your better scorers on the team right now. Like he's one of your more reliable, go-to guys off the bench, and he's been playing pretty good defense this year too.
Yeah, games he had played at least 10 minutes or more starting in game 1 all the way through game 16, and then against Washington he did not play. And then against the Lakers he had 14 minutes against the Knicks, which he really didn't do much. He had 12 points combined in those 2 games with 5 rebounds. And then Cleveland, he only played 6 minutes. And that's a team that has 2 bigs, where we could have used his size. James Wiseman, he didn't play in that game either, and he didn't play against the New York Knicks, which again is kind of interesting because they play 3 bigs. 2 of them start in Mitchell Robinson and Julius Randle, but then they were giving Isaiah Hartenstein some run too. I just don't know what they're trying to do. It's still really confusing to me. I don't know if they're trying to showcase James Wiseman. I think his reputation around the NBA is this is a guy that hasn't lived up to the hype. He doesn't have what it takes to be the number 2 overall pick. Why would we waste a trade on trying to bring him in? That's what I think most people think about James Wiseman. He does show some flashes of being really talented, but for the most part, he's just so underwhelming. He's like Killing to me. They're not the same. I just don't think there's much of a trade market for either of them. And I think even James Wiseman being the former number 2 overall pick, a 7-footer that can run the floor, which is really interesting. It's just many teams just aren't interested in this guy. I would be surprised if they could trade him.
Yeah, like some people were like, because I was reading some comments on Twitter about this because that's where I actually got the topic from. And I was like, you know what? Like if you're trying to like make James Wiseman available, why not just kind of keep him like the mystery box? Like keep him on the bench. Like you're playing him and showing teams like, yep, this is the James Wiseman experience. And it's not his fault, man. It really isn't. He's been injured the past, 3 years throughout his career. Hasn't really got a whole lot of opportunity, but there have been some bright spots with him. I mean, he's trying to block shots. His touch around the rim isn't like elite. It's like average. No center on this team can set a pick, and it drives me crazy, but that's another topic for another day. I think the last center to set a pick was Andre Drummond on this team, and Andre Drummond's been way removed from this team, but hey, maybe we trade for him with the Bulls. Never know. But I don't know, man. Like if they are showcasing him for trades, why not just keep him on the bench and kind of keep it like a mystery?
Yeah, I'm just so tired of not. I finally fell in love with Marvin Bagley, and at the point too where I was going to yell out that we won the trade again, but did not play, and then not getting very many minutes against Cleveland, and then choosing not to play him against I think Indiana in the final minutes of that game when outside of Durant, he's your most explosive big that can finish around the rim. It's just all weird to me. This season is so confusing.
Yeah, like I don't get it. Like I get that he's like the third string center and he's not getting any playing time. Like, if that's the case, like, I know I'm not saying that the G League is a demotion by any means, but like, go send them down to the Crews. Like, the Crews are playing like winning basketball right now, and they're one of the best teams in the G League. Like, go give him some run with the Motor City Crew so he can get some reps, so he can stay in game shape. Because like, most he's probably doing is practicing with the team every day and just sitting on the bench. Like, let him get some playing time with the G League. Like, I'm a firm believer, like, you send him down to the G League, maybe he can work on his game a little bit more against lesser competition, but, still dominate down there.
Yeah, maybe, but I don't know. He's just too underwhelming. I don't think there's much there, and it's a shame for James Wiseman. And it's crazy that we all praise Troy Weaver for being such a good talent evaluator. And if the Pistons had drafted any higher than 7th, or if they had drafted in the top 3, this would have been the pick. We would have had to watch him the entire time. I don't know if things would have been different if he had been drafted by Detroit and didn't have to be put in that position in Golden State, but who knows? We got this quote from Dave Bing, and I would love for you to play it real quick.
Okay.
Before we get into what I want to say about Dave Bing.
So, if you guys remember, before I do play this video, Dave Bing was with George Blaha and Greg Kelser in 2021 during Cade's rookie season. And this is what Dave Bing had to say about Cade Cunningham. And we're going to play the clip for you right now. So that was 2 years ago.
Yeah.
In 2021, because Saban Lee was still on the team. That's how old the video is. But the reason why I'm bringing it up on the podcast is because I posted that in 2021, and it has been getting retweeted on Twitter like crazy, saying, well, maybe Dave Bing was right. So, Lance, let me ask you this question. Was Dave Bing right with his assessment of the Detroit Pistons and Cade Cunningham?
Dude, when I first heard him, I remember this during the game, and I wish I still kept my old notes on what I said about Dave Bing, but I did think he sounded like the biggest hater when he was saying that on TV. But I can kind of understand it, because as we were talking about a little bit earlier, Cade, I think, is better in that 2 or 3 spot more than he is at the point guard spot, even though I think he does have the ability, but he's just a real chess piece and you can move him all over the place. So I agree with Dave Bing in the fact that they're still missing someone in the backcourt to really set this team off. But I disagree with him. And the only reason I disagree with him is because I think there needs to be more time in Cade's career before we can truly evaluate whether he's a franchise player or not. Because I think Cade does have the ability to be a franchise player, but just like all Pistons teams, it's going to take 4 other really good starters to maximize his ability and get the most out of him. And we just don't have it yet. So that part I'm going to disagree with for now, that he's not a franchise player, because this is really, he's only played, I think he's just crossed over 100 games played in his career. I could be wrong about that, but I think it's like at 100, maybe a little over, maybe just right under. Yeah, it could be either one of those, like I just said. But anyways, yeah, I'm going to disagree with Dave Bing on that just because we need more time. But I do agree with him that we need someone else in the backcourt to really push this team over the top and actually start winning some games.
I know a lot of people got pissed off when I did post this 2 years ago. And we reposted it again on Facebook, and people got in their feelings. They got upset. And I could understand why. Cade was, the first overall pick. The guy that they're going to build a team around. But to Dave Bing's, quote, his criticism, saying, I think he's going to be a great player. I think he's going to be a multiple-time All-Star. Saying, I don't think you can build your team around Cade Cunningham. My only argument is we haven't really built a team around Cade Cunningham yet. If you look at the roster, you have high draft picks, but there's pieces to the puzzle, but they're the wrong pieces.
Yep.
If you look at the roster construction, we talked about it last week. This roster construction is all over the place. It's just high lottery picks and some vets. You haven't really outside of Jalen Duren, really, and Asar Thompson, you haven't really given Cade pieces where he can be successful yet. Jalen Duren could be a lob threat. He could be just the guy that can, block shots, and a center that those two could, build around. I think Asar Thompson is one of those wings that, every team wants that can, guard multiple positions, but his offense of game is still a work in progress. It's not a finished product yet, and he's only a rookie. I don't really think you've gotten him a legitimate power forward. I love Isaiah Stewart, but I think we both agree. I think a bench role for him would be better for the team. And I think you have to look to upgrade that position, even though you just gave him an extension for the next 4 seasons. That's fine. You can have him off the bench. I think a lot of teams would love an Isaiah Stewart off the bench. And then like the shooting guard position right now is just so all over the place. Like 1 minute it's Alec Burks. Next minute it's Jaden Ivey or Marcus Sasser. Like the Pistons don't really have a shooting guard that they can just plug and play each and every game. And you're like, oh, Jaden Ivey's going to be starting like that's the norm. Like we don't really have like a consistent shooting guard in the lineup. It seems like it changes from like day to day. So I want to be a little bit more patient with Cade, but not to say that Cade hasn't made, mistakes this year. He has, he's in his 3rd season. He's a young player. He's not a finished product yet either, but it's hard to assess him as a player right now because our GM really hasn't done a good job of putting, the right players around him to maximize his game. Yep. Like you haven't really spaced the floor for Cade to be that type of player where he's not just like, how was that?
Something happened to your mic?
I don't know.
Oh, okay.
I thought that was your mic.
No, I don't know what it was. Yeah, Cade, real quick, in his last 6 games, he's averaged, I'm rounding up for everything, 26 points per game, 8 assists, 4 rebounds, 2 steals, 1.5 for all the nerds out there, myself included. 44% from the field, 44% from the three-point line on 6 attempts, 97% from the free throw line on 6 attempts, and 57% true shooting. Those are numbers of a franchise player. But to your point, it's just not the right roster around him. This roster is not built for winning anything. It's just a collection of players, and we'll see who sticks.
Yeah, it's a roster that will guarantee you a top 5 pick. That's what it is.
Yeah.
Like some of these guys would probably just be bench players or, fringe NBA players at best, if we're being honest.
Yeah, I mean, real quick on Isaiah Stewart, if he on a really good team, he's probably your 8th man. Your team's probably pretty damn good if Isaiah Stewart is your 8th man, instead of your starting power forward. Again, no offense to him. I just think he's better in that role. We do have a quote from Monty Williams. And this is on Marcus Sasser. And you will just say Killian Hayes. He said, Marcus Sasser and Killian right now, they've been the top compliments to Cade. Not only can those guys get us organized, but they can both knock down shots, and they're both pretty good defenders on ball and off ball. Sasser is just a fighter, and that comes from Mike Curtis. So do you agree with Monty that Sasser and Killian Hayes have been the top compliments to Cade Cunningham?
I think if you look at it from a standpoint of Killian doesn't really turn the ball over much, then it makes sense. Sasser is a completely different type of player than Killian. He's more of like that combo guard that can get you a basket and doesn't make a whole lot of mistakes. But you also have to understand that Sasser played 4 years of college basketball. Ivy didn't. Killian didn't. I agree with Monty in that standpoint, but you have to add context to it because Ivy, I believe, is 21 or 22. Sasser's 23, and I think Killian's, I want to say he's close to 23. He's either 22 or 23.
He's 22.
Yeah, he's 22. Yeah, like it's I don't even know who's a good fit because we're still losing games. Yeah. Personally, like to say that he's a better fit next to Cade, like based off of what? Like, because we're not winning. It's not in the win column. Maybe it's in the plus minus he's looking at. Maybe it's in turnovers. Maybe it's in defensive rating. Like I don't know. who's a better fit next to Cade Cunningham. I know some people think it's Killian, some people think it's Sasser, some people think it's Ivy. Personally, like, none of them are good fits next to Cade right now because they have Cade playing point guard, and we've seen him be more productive playing shooting guard. So I think that's a conversation maybe we should have. Maybe you move Cade to the 2 and have one of these guys play point guard.
Yeah, I think that's the next move under Monty Williams. But again, it's just who is it? And it just sucks that it really doesn't suck that there's 2 players that complement him so well. But like you were saying, with Killian, you get a guy that doesn't turn the ball over. He can steady the offense. He can take pressure off him defensively. Marcus Sasser, he's a little inconsistent right now. But when he's on, he's shooting 40% from 3, 46% from the field. Then he's shooting 100% from the free throw line because he's only taken 9 attempts and made all 9 of them on the season. But he's an efficient scorer, and he's a dog defensively. He'll get after it that end. I think if you had to pick one or the other, I think Monty goes Killian. I would go Marcus Sasser just because he provides more offense, and I think he needs to get more minutes to find that rhythm in the NBA. But they just give you both 2 different things. And I think with Jaden Ivey, there is a chance where he is a combination of both. But I just don't think we'll see it. I just don't think he'll get the opportunity. So that's my next question. Do you think Killian Hayes and Marcus Sasser get more minutes than Jaden Ivey does? I guess like the rest of the season.
Oh, for the rest of the season? I don't know, man. It's so hard to tell because, like, when you look at this team, like the shooting guard position, it's so random. And it's hard to kind of wrap your brain around it. But to answer your question, I think they probably will get more minutes unless they trade for a shooting guard at the deadline that makes sense to start next to Cade Cunningham. I think the norm is probably going to be either Sasser or Killian. I feel like Monty's more comfortable with these 2 guys because they don't make as many mistakes on the defensive end of the floor. And I think that's something he really, preaches. And they're low turnover guards.
Yeah. Yeah, I was thinking about this question a lot today. Like, do they get more minutes than Jaden Ivey? And if you had asked me this at the beginning of the season, I would say you're crazy. Like, how would that ever happen? That's nuts. A rookie and then Killian Hayes getting more minutes over Jaden Ivey? No way. I just think Jaden Ivey is like one mistake away from being the 11th man on the Pistons roster. That's what it feels like sometimes. Like,
yeah,
it's a defensive assignment. Well, Stanley Amude just got your spot. It just seems that way. And I just don't know how you can play for anybody like that. So I'm in agreement with you. I think Marcus Sasser and Killian Hayes do ultimately get more minutes. They become bigger parts of this rotation over Jaden Ivey as the season progresses, unless Jaden Ivey, there's just something that kicks in with him and Monty Williams where Monty's like, I have to play this guy. So with this quote, we get 2 names. We get Marcus Sasser and we get Killian Hayes. Jaden Ivey's name is nowhere near this quote. Does that concern you at all?
Because it's a repetitive offense.
Yeah.
It does, but I think at the same time, Jaden Ivey has to get better. And I think a lot of people in the chat said it perfectly. Like, if Jaden Ivey wants to get consistent playing time, he has to play both ends of the court. Like, there were probably 3 fouls last game that they just weren't needed. And I know he's trying on defense. He's trying to get better because he didn't come out of the draft like as a lockdown defender. Like, that was actually a knock on him, is like he's not the best defensive player. But I think if he puts games together where he's not, getting these ticky-tack fouls, he's defending, he's switching, he doesn't play like out of control, then yeah. I think that you'll start seeing Jaden Ivey mentioned in these quotes. But yeah, it is concerning. But at the same time, I do want to add context and, be rational about it. Because I think sometimes as fans, like we pick our favorites. Yeah. And like he was a favorite of mine. Like I thought he'd just be, a phenomenal player, but obviously the coaching staff just doesn't see it that way right now. They think he has talent. They think he has potential, but you draft another guard in Sasser who, not saying they have similar skill sets or similar games, but it's another guard at the end of the day, and a guard that's a year older than you that is basically taking your minutes right now. So like you should feel some type of way about that, and you should try to want to get better each and every day.
Yeah, I don't know. I got to see this real quick. I got to pull something up. I just want to see his minutes against the Cavaliers. But it's a little concerning to me. And it's for all the points I've made during this podcast. It's just Ivy, it's just he's still such a raw player, man. And it's unfortunate. Maybe he could have stayed another year in college. And I don't know if he's still a top 5 pick at that point. I think the Dwayne Wade comparisons that some people were making were a little unfair because they were out there just because he's a 6'4" athletic guard coming out of the Midwest. But he played 13 minutes against the Knicks and then 29 minutes against the Cavaliers. So even though he's not being talked about by Monty Williams, it seems like he's getting somewhat of a fair shot. And that's my next question to you. Do you think Jaden Ivey's getting a fair shot under Monty Williams? Because I think depending on who you ask, they would tell you no. But he's gotten a couple of starts. It seems like the leash is a little bit longer with Jaden Ivey, where there are times where he's playing more free, where he's playing more open. He's not looking over his shoulder. But then he only plays 13 minutes against the Knicks. And they play a handful of guards. And I know he got into foul trouble, but he only had 3 in that game, but it was still only 13 minutes. So, again, my question to you is, do you think he's getting a fair shot under Monty Williams?
I think he is because I'm looking at the game logs right now. Versus Knicks, he had 12 minutes. Lakers, he had 18. But if you look between Washington all the way down to Atlanta, it goes 32, 32, 29, 28, 29, 20. He's getting a fair shot, I would say, based off of minutes. He had 29 last night. I think Monty's giving him every shot to be a better basketball player. It's just I think a lot of fans are really hyper focusing on Killian being in the starting lineup and not Jaden Ivey being in the starting lineup. And I think that's what we're seeing a lot of times. Like, I think Ivy has the potential to be a really good player. I know I've told you that multiple times. It's just offensively, we know he's gifted. It's just the other side of the ball. It's just that's where he has to work on. Like, if his defense was as good as Killian Hayes, we wouldn't even be having this conversation. Like, he would be your starting 2 guard. There have been instances where he does play good defense for a possession or two, but there are other times where he just lets his let the offensive player just blows by him and Ivy gets caught kind of just like not paying attention. Like, it happens. He's a young player. I don't expect him to be a defensive player of the year 2. But there's promise there. There's potential there. But I don't know, man. It's hard to kind of assess him in year 2.
I agree. I agree with you, too, that I think he's getting a fair shot. I think the whole Monty Williams throwing him in the doghouse, it can be a little too much. It can be exaggerated by some fans. It does seem that way sometimes. And I think I've said it a few times, probably even on this podcast. But overall, I do think he's been given a fair shot by Monty Williams. But I also think Monty's being put in a really tough spot with a roster that is maybe like 6 players are actually NBA guys and the rest are just, I don't know, maybe rotation pieces or just regular season players on good teams. I don't know. It's a tough situation all around. But that's where I want to end it. Do we have any Q&A questions?
Yeah, we have a couple. We'll get to them really quick. This comes from Wes Weaver Jr. I feel like we've talked about this guy a few times on the podcast. No, we talked about him last year. And he asked, should we trade for Lauri Markkanen from the Jazz? If so, is Ivy in that deal?
Is Lauri Markkanen available? Are the Jazz already trying to blow it up again?
I don't know if he's available. I think some Pistons fans are like, if you want to try to get Lauri Markkanen, you probably would have to throw Jaden Ivey in that trade. But I don't know. I've told you, I felt like Lauri is like that perfect power forward to pair next to Duren. If you want to keep doing this too big lineup, I think you need a forward that is more of a perimeter threat and somewhat of a low post threat. I think he would be a perfect fit. I don't know if he's available, but he would be like on my wish list for sure.
So I typed in his name. I just typed in Lauri Markkanen and I hit news on Google. The first headline that pops up is Utah Jazz remain unlikely to trade Lauri Markkanen despite teams' struggles. This comes from Inside the Jazz. So it's like a Sports Illustrated article. If he is available and he is in play and the Pistons have a shot, you 100% trade for Lauri Markkanen. I think he's averaging 24 points per game. Like, I want to say around 7 rebounds. And I believe 3 3-pointers a game, according to Fantasy Basketball, because I have him on my team. He's phenomenal. I would do, he's averaging 9 rebounds per game, actually, in 1 steal, a block, 1 assist. He can play a little bit of defense. He would be the perfect complement in what you're really trying to do, having that guy that can spread the floor. I would do it in a heartbeat. I'd give up Jaden Ivey for Lauri Markkanen because I don't think it's my thing. Same thing about Zach LaVine. I just don't think Jaden Ivey will be better than Lauri Markkanen. So if you have a chance to upgrade like that, you take it.
Yeah, I mean, I told you last year, like, that's a player that I would look at because, like, it seemed like the Pistons were really hell-bent on having, like, 2 bigs in the starting lineup. Because that's why they traded for Wiseman. That's why they traded for Bagley the year before. They really wanted to have a strong front court. And I'm like, if they want to do that, cool. But you have to get the right type of perimeter front court players for this to work. Like, I think the reason why Minnesota is having such a great season so far is because Karl Anthony Towns can spread the floor and Rudy Gobert can basically protect the paint is, best as anyone in the NBA, and they have a star in Anthony Edwards. Like, it can work. You just need the right pieces around those 2 bigs to make it work. And the Pistons really don't have that right now. But I think if you were to trade for Lauri Markkanen, offensively, you'd probably see the points per game go up at least 5 to 8 points just from his presence alone. He's a really good player.
Yeah, he's averaging 3 made 3-pointers a game at 38%, shooting 9 of them a game. God, he's so good, dude. He's so good. I was so wrong about this guy. Remember when I was like making fun of the Jazz for trading Donovan Mitchell for Lauri Markkanen, and then he just became an all-star? Dude. Oh, man. If the Pistons can get him, you jump on that.
Yeah. So the only thing with him that I think Pistons fans probably wouldn't like is he's kind of a traffic cone defensively. He's not really he's not like really like a lockdown defender, but I think that's kind of a trade-off with him too.
I mean, no player is perfect. Like you said that a few times on this podcast tonight. So, I mean, if you want to get an all-star player that gives you 24 and 9 with an assist, 1 steal, and damn near a block per game, you live with the shortcomings. Yeah, who cares if he can't lock up a paper bag? You know what I'm saying? As long as he can do everything else at an elite level, you live with it.
Yeah, I think more fans would be upset that they traded Ivy for Markkanen personally.
Yeah, and I don't understand that.
I don't know, man. Like I said, some fans have their favorites.
We do. You're right.
Like I said, you would be heartbroken if Isaiah Livers was gone.
Dude, I'd understand it. I wouldn't be like, dude, screw the Pistons. I can't believe they got rid of Isaiah Livers. If he got traded and he was done in the NBA, he'd probably be in Kalamazoo a lot more. We might become friends, so that's okay.
For sure. This is a pretty good question. Let's see. I'm trying to find it. Give me a second. My computer's just freezing. Here it is. It says, will the refs need to adjust to Asar with how he plays D? Because that foul against Hart sucked.
Yeah. I think it's more of an adjustment period from Asar. There's still things he does defensively. Like sometimes he's too aggressive with his hands where he's, instead of moving his feet, He's moving his hands, trying to make a play on the ball, which you love that aggressiveness. He's such a smart player, though, that he'll figure out when he can get away with that and when he can't. But also, as he matures as a player, the refs will give him a longer leash on defense. Like once that becomes his reputation. But for now, as a rookie, they're putting him through the ringer, man. And we're just going to have to live with it all season. He could play the best defense. And there are times where he gets called for a foul where I look like him, where I'm like putting my hands on my head and I'm like, what? What did they call him for? And it's because he's a rookie and he hasn't learned the NBA game fully yet. It's just an adjustment period. He will be fine. I'm not blaming the refs for it. He will be a better player because of all the whistles.
Yeah, I think it's really hard in today's NBA. I know you had said it earlier, talking about how it's such an offensive-driven league, and it's really hard for guys like Asar to get those calls. But I think he will get some respect from the refs. I just don't know if it's going to be his rookie season. But, I mean, he broke a bone in his face from Josh Hart. Like, I know the elbow from Josh Hart wasn't on purpose. This elbow just kind of like went kind of crazy. But he did get a technical for flopping on that same play. And I'm surprised that the league didn't give him like a fine for the flop.
Did he get technical for the flop, or was it because he moved his elbow up? That's what I thought it was. I thought he had made a non-basketball play on that drive, even though they still gave the foul to Asar. So I don't know if it was actually that or not. You don't have
to. Like I don't know. It's because I was watching that play and it was like I thought Asar did a pretty good job defending, but I think they just gave the benefit of the doubt because Josh Hart has been in the league for a little bit. But I don't know. I didn't like that play. I was kind of cringing when I watched it.
I agree.
We got a couple of more questions. This comes from Truth Teller because he did not agree with our Ivy take about him getting a fair shot. But hey, like I said, I don't really care if you guys agree with me. That is what the comment section is for. That is what the live stream is for. If you don't agree with me, that's fine. I don't care. Not going to hurt my feelings. He asked, may I ask what part of Asar's game outside of defense is more mature than Jaden Ivey's? Outside of defense, it's actually a really good question.
It is.
I would say, I don't know if Asar... I could argue cutting because Asar's very good at cutting to the basket, but so is Jaden Ivey. I think they're really close in terms of cutting to the basket. I think transition, they're very close to each other in terms of just flourishing in the open court. But if I did have to give you an answer, Trutella, I would probably say Asar is just a hair better than Jaden Ivey at cutting to the basket.
I would say, too, that there's still some over dribbling with Jaden Ivey when he tries to get to the rim. With Asar, it seems like he dribbles more with purpose. Like he knows where he's going already when he has the ball versus Jaden Ivey. And I personally think Asar Thompson is already a better playmaker. I think he sees the floor better than Jaden Ivey. I think Jaden Ivey gets tunnel vision and actually passes up a lot of great opportunities for his teammates because he's looking to score so much. I think that's where the maturity lies in. And I would also say that Asar plays more controlled. Yeah, there are times where he drives in the lane and you're like, I can't believe he was trying to do that in transition, but he can go over the top of people. We've seen it plenty of times. And I mean, I would do this. If I could jump like that and dunk on and catch some of the bodies he has, I try to do it every game. But that's where I think the maturity is in Asar Thompson game is it's playmaking. It's dribbling with a purpose. He knows where his spots are. Even though he doesn't really have many spots on the floor, he knows where he needs to be and he knows how to get there with the ball. And I just think he plays more controlled and he has a more patient game than Jaden Ivey. That would be that's what I would say. That's where I think the maturity is.
Yeah, I think people in the chat rebounding too.
Yeah, that's a fairly obvious one. I should have said that.
Yeah, I was trying to I was just trying to think like offensively, like what he's better at. But like I said, Churchill just had another comment. He said that statistically speaking, Ivy is the most efficient player on the team, but yeah, he's raw. I think he's raw from the standpoint of defensively. Maybe you misunderstood us. We've never said that Jaden Ivey is a raw player offensively. His offensive numbers are great. You're right. I said defensively, he's raw. He's not completely developed defensively. I never said offensively that he's not a good player. He is. I think he had the same kind of effort on the offensive end as he did on the defensive end. He would probably get a bulk of the shooting guard minutes.
I mean, yeah, he is, but he still had some games where he's 1 for 7. Then he had some games where he's 2 for 4. Now that's not his fault. He only played 11 minutes in that game. I mean, he's had some, but then he had a game where he's 3 for 10. So he is efficient. I just think there's more growth to him offensively.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he's a pretty good spot up shooter. I think where he's a little raw in is he over dribbles. He doesn't always, like, he has the tunnel vision. Sometimes the playmaking, he doesn't see certain things on the floor where some games he does. That's where I just think he's raw in. Like, I don't know. I don't know, man, because like when I think of the comparisons that people have made for Jaden Ivey, like we'll just say, for example, like Ja Morant. Ja Morant, even though I think they're both similar athletes, I felt like Ja Morant kind of came into the league with like a better offensive game, a deeper bag than Jaden Ivey, even though there was a lot of things to work on. So I don't know. I guess that's kind of where I mean. Like, there's just Jaden Ivey offensively, he's pretty one-dimensional. I mean, I guess you could say two-dimensional because either he's driving or he's spot up shooting a 3. There's not really much more to it, and I think there's just more growth to it. I don't think it's an insult to say that from Jaden Ivey too. Like, he's an incredibly hard worker, and he's only going to get better. But I just think there are things on his game where he does need to improve on them, and that will make him a better player. Like having an in-between game, playing more under control, knowing when to go fast, knowing when to go slow, just things like that. But it's just my opinion, though.
Yeah, he's a second-year player. I'll just say that. Like, I think sometimes fans they're so tough on players that we have. And we have such high expectations, and when they don't reach our expectations, then we're just like micro analyzing like what they're not good at. And I think when you do that, then you're just kind of taking the fun out of watching basketball games. Like, every player on this roster has a flaw, or more than one. They're young. This team's incredibly young. Like, if you're just gonna, like, I can't even go on Twitter anymore because my feed is just so toxic and negative. Like, it'll be like, oh, Cade Cunningham has 5 turnovers in 5 minutes. He's not a player you build around. I was like, dude, just watch the game and shut the fuck up. Jesus. Like, if you're gonna go on Twitter and bitch about the team, like, dude, like, just like if you're that miserable, don't watch the game. Simple as that. Like, I know some people have, like, texted me, they're like I'm not going to check in until changes are made. I'm not going to watch this team or invest my money into this product anymore because it's shit. Like, if you want to do that, that's fine. But like, some people they go overboard on Twitter. And there's certain people on Twitter that I have just had to mute because they just analyze everything to the point where it's like annoying to read.
There are some people that I loved engaging with on Twitter, and I love to drop the likes and the reposts because I think they're pretty insightful. But this losing streak, it's like you can't even find a sliver of positivity. You know what I mean? I know we've each been equally negative on this podcast, but we also still try to be a little positive. Like, we try to point out some things, but dude, they're just some of my favorites on Twitter where I'm with you. Like, why watch? Why waste your time? Why do you put yourself through hell, for this team if you're only going to complain about them and rip them apart? I mean, like, they're never going to be perfect. And if that's your expectation, then it's like, I just don't know why you waste your time, because that's unachievable.
It is. I'm not going to name any names on Twitter, but there are people I've followed and I respect. And like, I woke up this week and people are, because James Edwards was catching strays like a mother. And I'm like, why is James Edwards catching strays? Because he's not biased, because he's truthful. Like, I got people in my mention saying like, yeah, James Edwards is Troy Weaver's lapdog. I'm like, dude, you guys are so like, what? I feel bad for the beat writers. I really do, man, because they're just getting dragged through the mud. Like, each beat writer is a little different in terms of like how they like articulate their articles and like how they try to get their point across. But like, not saying they're perfect. We're not perfect either, but I think just the negativity is just really toxic right now. And we try to find the positives. We try to find the positives when there are some, but we also like to bring, the negatives and try to be objective as possible when we can. This is a question from Bravo. He said, with this roster, you think Casey is better than Monty?
Oh, man, come on.
Shout out to Bravo, man.
I think there have been moments during the season where we've seen some interesting designs offensively from Monty. So I would give him the advantage. I mean, like, especially when we're watching Cade off the ball, there have been some interesting things done that way. I would like to see them try to do a little bit more with Duren out of the high post, but also right now, I just think he's better as just like a lob catcher and rolling to the rim, And so, I don't know. With Casey, I didn't really like the offense we were seeing from him. And with Monty, I've been impressed sometimes. They're still far and few, but give me Monty over Dwayne Casey, man.
Yeah, I've seen this a lot on social media too. They're like, Casey's teams never quit on him. I was just like, that's true, but I don't know, man. Like, this is what I'll say, because I got in a conversation yesterday about this. I think Monty Williams is a good veterans coach. I do.
Yeah.
I think if you wanted it, you had a guy that was good with younger guys. Like Dwayne Casey was good with younger players. If you wanted to go get Kevin Ollie, I didn't really have a problem with it. I mean, he was an OTE as a player development coach. But to answer your question, Bravo, I thought Casey was the right coach for this team. And when you want to make that next step, when you want to find a coach that maybe you're in the playoffs and you just can't get past that next step, then you go get a Monty Williams. I don't think Monty Williams was the guy to really go out and get when you're not ready to compete. He's a coach that likes his veterans. He's a coach that, plays favoritism to veterans. And I think that you're starting to see that already. And not to say that he can't turn this ship around. I mean, I remember Van Gundy's first year in Detroit. His first 28 games, he was 5-23 before he waived Josh Smith. Like, but you want to add context to it. I mean, Monty's 2-18 in his first 20. Like, it's tough. It's tough. I'm trying to, find the silver lining and the positives the best I can with this question. But I thought Casey, to me, the teams, they always tried, they competed, but when I watch these kids, they just seem confused of where to be and what to do. Like they can lock in, but not for a full 48. And I think, that's just a learning process with them that they have to figure it out. It's not something a coach can, go out there and do it for them. It's something they have to learn as players.
Dude, I cannot tell if my chair dropped or something is wrong with my camera. Dude.
Yeah, you went from like 6 feet to 4 feet.
Yeah, I looked up and I'm like, what the heck is this? And here I am playing with the camera. Holy crap.
Yeah, it's like I said, it's all good, man. Like, my chair probably went down like a good, 4 inches since the podcast. So I was way up here, and now I'm a little bit down. But I don't know. Some of these office chairs, man, swear.
I really can't tell if my chair went down. Whatever.
Yeah, it's I don't know, man. Like, that was a great question, Bravo. It really was. I just think, when you look at these coaches, there were a lot of options for the Pistons to go out and get. they weren't sexy big names like Tom Gores likes. And like if you look at his track record since he's been here, he always goes after those big names. Like we were talking about Jaron Collins from Golden State. We were talking about Chris Quinn from Miami. We were hopeful he would take the offer, but he never did. I mean, we talked about Kevin Holly ad nauseum. I think we spent more time talking about coaching than we talked about draft prospects last summer.
We did for a while. Remember Charles Lee, too? He was in play. I don't even know what happened to him, but I kind of wanted Charles Lee. You know, I feel like if you were going to go with a young team, just go with a young coach. He could be real creative and try to figure some things out. I don't know. It's such a weird season, dude. It's not what I thought at all.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I don't know. I think, you know, as this team gets healthier, as you have a vet in Bojan who can get you 20 a night, I think the wins will come. But I don't think we're going to go a whole nother month without a victory. I know someone in the chat says we're on pace for 8 wins this season.
It makes me wonder if we could beat the that really crappy Bobcats team. I think from like 2011 and 2012.
What was their record? Let me see.
I think they only had 7 wins.
Really? I remember that as a kid. Was it 2012? I believe.
I think it might have been. I think it was a short season too, but.
Let me see. Yeah, 7-59. I think, yeah, it was a shortened season.
Yeah.
Want to hear something funny? Do you remember the head coach on that team?
I don't actually on that team. Who was it?
Well, his son is an assistant coach on our team.
Paul Silas?
Yeah.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah. Now, Ashton said he's very disappointed. I feel you, Ashton. I do. This season was just like they sell us hope, Ashton. They've been selling us hope since we drafted Cade. And we thought we were getting all these, you know, mid-tier to maybe big names in free agency, and we use our cap space on old guys and we get cap flexibility. I don't know, man. Like they got to do something. They got to do something at this deadline. Like they can't just being so complacent each and every year. Like I told you like 2 weeks ago, like about like Cade. Like I would not be surprised. Like if I was Cade, I'd be getting really fed up. Like really fed up. Like you got to give him some freaking floor spacers, man. You got to do something.
I agree. I want to see some moves at the deadline. Just go recruit, Ashton. Recruit some guys for us.
Yeah. This is a question from Trutella. He said, why haven't we had any words from Troy Weaver about the start of the season? He seems unusually quiet. Well, we're probably going to get a letter like last season. Do you remember?
Yeah.
Remember the letter we got? I was just like, bro, like you did not just write us a letter for why this team only won 17 games. I was like, dude, are you serious right now?
Dude, I remember I hope it's like a South Park, like when BP was like, sorry. You know, I hope it's like that. Sorry on the letter, and that's all it is. That's what I want to see from Troy. I don't expect him to say anything about at all. I think
no, because he can use the injury. He can use the injury as an excuse. He can say like, "Well, we were injured. That's why we didn't have the season that we wanted." And like, I think Shams said that on not Shams Karania, but Shams of Pistons Twitter had said that like he can use the injury as an excuse. They can like I don't even know who you could use as a scapegoat for this season. I feel like someone's going to get the blame, but I don't know.
What would you want him to say?
I don't think there's anything he can say. I think he knows that he's built a roster. Me and you have talked about it before. I don't think that the pieces fit. I think he needs to be extremely active at the deadline. Like if he's active at the deadline and you're getting off of Alec Burks, like let's say they don't have more than 10 wins at the deadline, as an example. I'm trading all my expiring deals and getting draft picks or assets or players that I think that can help Cade Cunningham. Like I would not hate a Cameron Reddish from the Lakers. I think he's just a body. Like we need small forward depth. Like, we need more forward depth. Like, I love Stanley Amude. Happy that he's getting an opportunity, but we need some real, legitimate small forwards that can knock down a shot and play some defense. Like, I feel like a broken record. Like, that's all I was asking for this summer. Like, I wanted a small forward that could play some defense and shoot some threes, and we didn't get it.
I don't know, man. I really don't know. I really don't know what else to say. It's just this season sucks. That's all I'll say, and I'll leave it at that.
No, I feel bad for the fans, man. Like, I feel bad that. Did I tell you I got a call from a season ticket holder the other day?
No, what happened there?
Or not a season ticket holder, but like a ticket sales rep. I don't know why I said a season ticket holder. So he calls me. He says, "Hey, we want to have, you do a game. It looks like you bought some tickets last year." I'm like, "Yeah." Dude, he says, for 5 games, $1,500. And I'm like, no disrespect to the Pistons organization. No disrespect to the ticket salesman. They probably have the hardest job right now out of all 4 major sports teams.
Yeah.
But, man, you got to lower your tickets. You have 2 wins right now. There's no way you're trying to charge me $1,500 for a 5-game pack. They were lower bolt tickets, right? But There's no way, man. Like, I just saw the other day the Grizzlies were selling tickets for $2 because they don't have John Morant right now. Like, you got to lower – you want that arena to, like, be somewhat packed? Like, you got to lower the tickets, man. Like, $25-$30 for upper bowl. Like, what are we doing?
Yeah, I remember last time talking to a ticket rep, and I think they were saying I could do – I think it was like – I don't even remember the ticket game package, but – in order for me and just for me to get 2 tickets per game where we were sitting the season before, it was like going to be almost $8,000. And I'm like, they're like, yeah, but you'll get to see a couple of the top 20 teams in the NBA. And I'm like, well, who are going to be the top 20 teams? They're like, well, you'll probably get to see the Lakers. And I was like, LeBron James isn't playing. You know what I'm saying? Like, he's not going to play against this team. So why would I pay that much money to these games, even though they were great seats? But I was good on that. That's just way too much money that was last year. That was the Experience 17 wins. And even if I had got that many tickets to go to those games, I probably wouldn't have seen one of the wins.
Yeah, it's crazy. Like, yesterday I got to go to a game, and I didn't have to pay for these tickets. Actually, Valley Sports Detroit actually hooked me up to sit in their suite and watch the game, which, like, one, it was great. I had a lot of fun, met a lot of great people. But, like, I would not pay for a suite. You know how much suites are?
No, I have no clue.
Suites are ridiculous. They're like, they can get up in the thousands. Like, I was just like, I'm probably never going to sit in a suite for the rest of my life. I would not pay that type of money, because I went on there and, like, to rent out a suite, it's like $10,000. I was like, no, I'm not that big of a baller.
No, same.
And someone said Shannon Sharp paid $350,000 for 21 games for the Lakers seats.
It's a lot of money to go watch a sport, man.
I mean, he's LeBron's number 1 fan. He's got to go.
You think he wears those tight shirts for LeBron?
I don't know, man. Well, we're gonna do one more question, then we can hang up, man. Man, I love people in the comment section. They're so funny. Oops, wrong one. So shout out to us, the most reasonable Piston channel. I wouldn't say that, man. I'm pretty negative sometimes. But this roster is ridiculous. I salute you for all to continue to cover them. Who do we move at the deadline?
You got to move Alec Burks.
Yeah, I would say that.
You have way too many guards. You have another shot maker in Marcus Sasser. Monte Morris still hasn't played. If you can move Bojan, move him, but I would try to bring back not just draft capital, but I would try to bring back like maybe a younger veteran that can fill his role. And I doubt this happens, and I'm going to say his name again. But if you're not going to put Jaden Ivey in the best positions to succeed, please trade him and let him find greener pastures, man. You know what I'm saying? Before his value dips just too much. Like if he's just going to be in and out of the rotation, playing 13 minutes one game, 29 the next game, where he can't find a rhythm, he can't find any continuity or develop any chemistry with Cade Cunningham, just trade him for his benefit and bring in someone new that can play alongside Cade Cunningham that you view that's going to be here for a long time. Those would be my three names that I would move at the deadline. And again, I really don't want to move on from Jaden Ivey, but again, my point remains, you're not going to put him in position to exceed, trade him now. If you don't think he's part of your future, trade him now and just let it be done with, man.
Yeah, like to your Ivy point, I get what you're saying. Like he has value, try to get something for him if you're not going to use him. But I think the Pistons will use him. It's just they're going through like a weird situation right now with trying to see who's best next to Cade Cunningham at the 2. I will say this though. The Pistons did have a trade on the table. I don't think we might have talked about this. Like the Rockets offered a couple of seconds for Alec Burks and we turned it down.
Yeah.
Because they wanted us to take Kevin Porter Jr. at the time when we wouldn't do it. If that's kind of the market for Burks, a couple of second-round picks, I mean, he's going to be an expiring. Like, if you feel like Sasser is ready to take that role, that Alec Burks role, then go for it. If you can get something for him. James Wiseman will be an expiring. Killian Hayes will be an expiring. Like I said, there's a lot of players on this roster that you could trade. Joe Harris, Monte Morris.
Do you see what Alec Burks is shooting though right now?
Yeah, he's playing bad.
Dude, it's terrible. It's real bad. I mean, other than the free throw percentage, I mean, 3-point percentage is all right at 36.6, but he's still below his career. And then 34% from the field. I mean, dude, if you can get a couple seconds for him, you might just have to take it.
Yeah, I think to kind of twist Ricky's question, I think the Pistons make 2 trades at the deadline. I think I think they're going to try to get off Joe Harris's contract because I don't really think he's contributed too much this season, even though he is hurt. He's supposed to be coming back pretty soon. I think they're going to try to get something. If he can get healthy, maybe a contender throws you something. And maybe they trade Alec Burks because they have so many guards, and there's no need to have this many guards on the roster. I think I counted like 6 or 7 on this roster. Like, try to go get some small forward depth if you can. Try to see what's out there. Maybe a mid-tier guy, maybe a lower-tier guy that doesn't get like a whole lot of playing time. Like, try to get some of those guys and see maybe you can get a Hamidou Diallo type trade. Like when they traded Svi Mihailovic for Hamidou. Like, try to find like guys like that they're on the team, but they just can't get much playing time because the roster is pretty deep. Like, try to find trades like that if possible.
Trade him to the Lakers. They're always looking for shooting.
Yeah, man. Like, I feel like there are players out there that you can trade for. Like, you know, maybe low-key guys not every fan talks about, or maybe they know. There's guys out there that are talented that just aren't getting much burn. Like, for the life of me, I feel like the Pistons are going to trade for Pokusevski. Like, I could just, it seems like a Troy Weaver type move. He's an OKC guy. He plays for OKC. Like, I could see that happening.
Dude, a 6'11" shooting guard? Why not? Why not, dude? That's like 165 pounds. Just go for it. What do you got?
He's the only player that has highlights and lowlights.
Dude, it's God, that guy's amazing.
Oh, we could wrap up the podcast. If you want to tell the people where they can find it, where they can rate it, and where they can follow us on social media, go for it.
Thank you guys for listening to the Pistons Talk Podcast. Do us a favor, go to Google, Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts and subscribe. After you subscribe, leave a review, drop a rating, but more importantly, tell a Pistons fan.
Peace, guys.